Does socialism cause economic distress? Is there a strong correlation between social policy and economic distress? Are immigrants fleeing third world countries because of socialism, only to vote for more socialism when they get to their destination country? Well, I think I already know what Prager University says, but let's take a look.
Hey everybody, it's TJ, the Amazing Atheist here with the Loudmouth Liberal. This shit's legit, okay? Loudmouth Liberal, subscribe to that shit. If you're not subscribed, you're a piece of shit. Fuck you. Fuck you. What is wrong with you? Why haven't you fucking subscribed? If your hand is not moving towards that fucking subscribe button, I will fucking find you and I will kill you personally. You heard it here.
I live in Guatemala and I work throughout Latin America. And I want to speak to the millions of fortunate Hispanic immigrants living in the United States, legally or not. I have a question for you. Why do you support the same policies in the U.S. that cause you to flee your home country?
All right, so I don't really know what she's alluding to yet, but...
Think the most right-wing thing you can.
Mussolini?
No, not like... extreme.
Mussolini.
No, just like what...
Like an ideal?
About supporting the same policies as what they fled. It's right-wing talk for socialism. They're basically going to make... It seems like they're going to make the point that socialism is why this country's stuck.
This is I'm talking about.
We'll continue and then we'll rip them to shreds.
Yeah.
Those that lead to a bigger and bigger central government. You know only too well that the more power the government has, the more corrupt it becomes.
See,
where she say she's Guatemalan?
Yeah. She says more power means they're more corrupt. Well, that's largely true, but that's not the only reason that they're corrupt. Like, a small government can be fairly corrupt, too. That's not the only way.
Oh, yeah.
You know, eliminating social programs is going to be a smaller government, but it's not going to necessarily get rid of corruption.
Yeah, but look, exactly, because look at, like, a lot of the countries in Central Africa.
Yeah.
Corrupt as shit and, like, fairly weak governments.
Right, exactly, yep.
And South America as well.
True. Well,
except for, like, Brazil. Brazil has a huge government, and Colombia does too, and certain ones. But, like, Uruguay, dude, they're, like, I think it's Uruguay, their president is worth $2,500 or something.
Oh, wow.
He's like the poorest president. He's the poorest president in the world.
Dang.
Yeah.
All right.
Like, my truck's worth more than their president.
Yeah.
My home country, like most other nations in Central and South America, is very poor. 54% of the population lives in poverty, and 13% live in extreme poverty. Half of all children under 5 are chronically malnourished. Crippling government corruption is the norm. Opening a new business can take months, even years, because of a multitude of regulations that are designed to line the pockets of bureaucrats.
Okay.
Isn't that because a lot of times in these countries, like, pretty much to get anything done, you have to bribe somebody?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so like they're basically saying that's what's going to happen in the United States if you vote for social programs and socialist policies.
Assuming that there's correlation is not correct.
Yeah, I know. Even if there was correlation, like, that doesn't mean anything, and, like, the correlation is pretty weak, since the number of socialist governments that are corrupt versus the number of socialist governments that aren't, it's more balanced, you know what I mean? There's plenty on both sides.
Exactly. I mean, and to a conservative, the United Kingdom would be socialist.
Right.
Yet they are doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Denmark, Canada, Scandinavia, Iceland, Germany, even some of southern, like even Italy and, you know, Spain and shit like that. Like even some of southern Europe.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure most of them.
Yeah. The only ones that are still pretty corrupt are like Eastern Europe, Belarus, and
yeah.
You know.
So the cost is much too high for the average citizen. Quite simply, unless you're politically connected in Guatemala, you probably want to leave.
Yeah, like if you're not a part of the system when the system is all that matters, of course you're not
going to want to be around. But it's typically like conservative ideas that give more power to the corporate oligarchy that we have in the United States.
Oh, without a doubt.
Voting to take away
Without a doubt.
corporate welfare in favor of welfare for the people is certainly not what is going on in Guatemala when you have to be connected and have money to be able to bribe the people that you need to, or be friends with the people that you need to.
Exactly. And then the problem is that socialists like Bernie Sanders come along, and then people just scoff at him, saying that he doesn't understand economics and all that kind of stuff, because these Republicans have been tricked into believing that it is poor people's fault on welfare programs that puts the financial strain, and not corporations paying no taxes.
Right.
And in the last 20 years, many Guatemalans have left. Or to put it more honestly, they fled. The fortunate ones reached the United States, the freest and wealthiest nation in human history.
Well, we might be one of the wealthiest nations in the world, but we're definitely not one of the freest, since 1% of our population is in prison, is incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
For nonviolent offenses, for possession of a substance.
Especially things like marijuana, like please.
Yeah.
Fucking please. And of course, you live in Colorado, where it is finally legalized, as it is in a lot of other states, but, still in over half of the country, it's a very serious offense.
Yeah.
For just marijuana. I mean, it's ridiculous. And there's, I think it might be Sweden. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's Sweden that, like, if you're caught with a drug offense, especially if you're a first-time offender. Now, if you're selling, it's a different story. But if it's just a possession charge, then they send you to a state-funded rehab instead of jail, and it's cheaper than sending you to jail, and it's more effective at rehabilitation.
Like, if you look at Swedish jails, like, they're not like American jails. They're built around rehabilitation, even if it's not drug. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if it's not drug rehab, they give them skills that they can use after they get out, instead of taking away their ability to get a job and not teaching them anything unless they teach themselves.
I mean, if you get caught up in the criminal justice system in the United States, like, you're kind of fucked for life.
Yeah.
I mean, because once you start getting a rap sheet, then it's just, for even like the silliest of things, it sets you up for failure. Even like misdemeanor probation sets you up for failure, because you have to pay these fees. You have to pay hundreds of dollars for, like a year of probation. And if you can't pay that, then you have to go to jail. It's crazy.
Yeah.
There are at least 1 million Guatemalans living in the U.S. Nearly every Mexican and Central and South American immigrant in the United States, whether they immigrated legally or illegally, moved or fled to the U.S. for the same reasons: economic opportunity and the freedom to shape their own lives. In short, you came to the United States to participate in what Americans call the American dream. But have you ever asked yourself, why is the United States so free, so much less corrupt, and so much more affluent than any Latin American country? The answer lies first and foremost.
Like, who determines that America is the least corrupt government?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're basing that on facts or just.
Well, I would insist that they're not basing it on facts, because of our private financing of elections that ends up being corporations, and then they find ways around with super PACs, where they're not donating directly, but they're donating for the efforts.
Exactly, and there was only 2 candidates in this last election that did not receive money from super PACs, and that was Trump because he didn't need to, and Bernie Sanders because he had integrity.
Yeah, and when Congress has an approval rating of like 12 to 20%, can you really say that the United States has the least corrupt government in the world?
And there's no term limits on congressmen.
Right. So people just vote their party every year, and that they win their gerrymandered district.
There's a case that's going to the Supreme Court that might outlaw gerrymandering very soon. Yep. I don't. They've come up with some like scientific formula that proves, because for a long time they insisted that gerrymandering does not produce unfair results in elections. But I think it was like Wisconsin, where like over 1 million people more in like some district voted for the Democrat, or like maybe it was across the whole state. More people voted Democrat. Either it was the state or it was a district, but the Republicans won it because of gerrymandering.
Yeah.
And so anyway,
Yeah, they'd be fucked without it.
And the Republicans gerrymander a lot more than the Democrats do.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a case that's like going to the Supreme Court soon. I mean, I think like by next year that might outlaw gerrymandering. And gerrymandering has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I could be wrong, but I think gerrymandering has been around since like the 1800s. Because I took a class as an undergraduate called Elections and Political Parties, and we read a book called Plunkett of Tammany Hall, and that was about politics in the 1870s, I want to say, in New York City. Very interesting. But yeah, gerrymandering was around then. So
yeah, all right.
Most in the unique American belief in limited.
Maybe we
government.
should explain what gerrymandering is.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just realized if you don't know what gerrymandering is, basically what gerrymandering is like redrawing the boundaries of certain districts to benefit a political party. Let's say that rich white males are much more likely to be Republicans than low-income African Americans. So if you are a Republican, then you want to carve up this district in such a way to where the district doesn't include a low-income African American neighborhood, but does include a wealthy, white neighborhood. And so it's not fair. It's not just taking districts like this. It's chopping them up into like crazy shapes just to manipulate.
There's a lot of weird ass shaped districts because of gerrymandering.
It should have been illegal from the jump, but
Because the smaller the government, the less the corruption.
you say smaller government has less corruption.
The smaller the government, the less the corruption. She's drawing like a correlation that she is basically saying it happens all the time and is guaranteed.
On no evidence presented.
Right, I know.
That is true. That's based on nothing. It's just a statement. And that's the problem, is that, especially with these Trumpian douchebags, they just say things without an actual basis, and then they just believe them. For example, Trump, I'm going to build a wall and make Mexico pay for it. Okay, actually, we're going to build a wall and pay for it, and then we're just going to tax the shit out of Mexico with tariffs. And then people are like, oh yeah, that's what he said all along.
Yeah.
No. Making baseless statements.
The way to lessen corruption is to have more checks and balances, and it depends on how you have them set up, whether they're going to be functional or not.
Exactly. I mean, if anything, a smaller government might be easier to
corrupt, right? A smaller group.
Mm-hmm, because you have to bribe fewer people, and there's fewer checks and balances. If you can pay off a few people instead of a larger amount of people, it seems it would be easier.
Yeah,
so,
groupthink is far more likely in a small government. That's how families ran countries for the longest time.
Exactly.
All right,
you're less likely to have obstructionists in a smaller government.
Yeah.
The corruption. And the smaller the government, the more individual freedom and personal responsibility. And given those things, along with hard work and talent, you can accomplish your life's goals. So
let's stop it right here.
Okay.
So, individual freedom plus personal responsibility plus hard work plus talent equals life's goals.
What if you don't have fucking talent?
Okay. But also, I hate this fucking pull yourself up by the bootstraps type thinking, because you can work as hard as you fucking want to, but if the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, doesn't matter how hard you work, you're still going to live in poverty. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. And of course, minimum wage. If minimum wage was adjusted now for what to inflation as it was in the 1970s, it would be $11 an hour.
Right.
And so
and
if
you look at productivity of the worker, I think it's supposed to be like 21 cents or $21 an hour, like how much the American worker produces, how much more he produces now than before. A lot of it just because of technology.
Yeah,
So
but yeah, I
corporations are
mean,
just
so
profiting that.
the whole Paul Ryan fucking thing. Try a little harder.
Yeah.
Try a little harder. Like, come on. Like, there's a lot of people who work 2 jobs and still can't make it. So don't feed me this bullshit about work hard and then you'll succeed.
Yeah, and a
lot of
times the only way to move up from minimum wage is to be like a supervisor, and then you get like $1 or $2 more an hour.
Exactly, and
Like,
you have a lot more responsibility for very little.
Like
and you're
you
still
can work
making.
like I think you can work your way up from being poor to being middle class, but that's
Yeah.
about as high as you're going to climb in a lifetime.
Exactly. And then the whole. I mean, personal responsibility. Of course, people are responsible for their own actions. People are responsible for. I mean, if you are able to work, you should work. But there's a 40-hour work week that was implemented for a reason, and the fact that people are having to work 2 to 3 jobs in a 2-person household, even where there is 2 parents or 2 guardians, and they're both working 2 or 3 jobs, just to fucking put food on the table. That is ridiculous. You cannot live on minimum wage. You cannot. And people will say, well, you're not supposed to work minimum wage jobs forever. Well, guess what? Even factory jobs and stuff are paying $12 an hour. It's still not a livable wage.
Yeah, it's still what minimum wage should be at.
If you only 1/3 of the country has a bachelor's degree or higher, and so that's 66% does not, and it is very difficult to find a decent job. So anyway, let's move on.
Yeah.
To my question, why would you support policies that keep expanding the power of the government when they are the very policies that doom your home countries?
So obviously she's just running along with this narrative.
Exactly.
Is it because you think that when Democrats offer you free stuff, it means they really care about
Free
you?
stuff.
All right, yeah, free stuff. They always throw that shit around. And it's like, look at it, it's fucking baby formula and fucking a hospital.
This is what the fuck, dude. This is what pisses me off so bad is when I still had Facebook, then I would see like these old men like, oh, you fucking young liberals, you just want free stuff. You just want free stuff. You're so lazy. You just want handouts from. So I have to work so you can just get free stuff.
And the free stuff is always like healthcare and education. It's like
it's
always
like
coming from uneducated bastards that are like, I shouldn't have to pay for your education. Shouldn't have to pay for the advancement of this society.
Yeah, exactly. It's like fucking, grants and financial aid and stuff is an investment in the country.
Yeah.
It's not just free stuff for you. It's investing in the country because it produces more educated people who are going to make more money, who are going to pay more taxes. And that's what you Republicans are all about anyway, right? So, come on.
Yeah.
Do you think that when Republicans talk about enforcing immigration laws, it means they are going to send you back? Let's be honest.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes they talk about deportation.
You didn't come here for free stuff. You came for the economic opportunity that allows you to work and earn.
Yeah, but you know what allows you to be able to work and earn? Healthcare, being able to actually like eat and feed your kids. Then you can actually like work a normal job.
Exactly.
And if you have education, then you can work on higher level stuff and earn more.
And pay more taxes.
Yeah. All right, let's keep.
And of course, a nation has an obligation to enforce its borders. Certainly, every country in Central and South America does. In fact, much more so than the U.S. Perhaps you believe that your home country is poor not because of failed socialism and corrupt big government, but because of issues unrelated to ideology. Not enough natural resources, imperialism, and so on. Or worse, you believe that the U.S. has gotten rich on the backs of poor nations.
Okay, so she brings up imperialism, and she's basically trying to deny that the U.S. is imperialistic.
Yeah.
War in Iraq. That's all I.
And I don't think I mean, I guess in recent times we've got, like, the U.S. has gotten richer off of the backs of poorer nations, but I mean, that's just because we're moving our factory jobs over there. Like, they would still be working just as hard. They'd just be working for food, growing food and shit, subsistence living, instead of working. So it's not necessarily on the backs of them, but it's like they corrupt leadership is gonna make them poor. Like, the rich and the poor having the biggest divide. That's what makes them poor.
Well, that's the thing is, like, I think it was like in the 1950s. I know we're talking about other countries here, but I'm going to bring it back here. Like in the 1950s, the average CEO made 4 times the lowest worker, and now it's like hundreds of times, if not thousands of times more.
It was 4 times in the 50s?
Crazy. It was 4 times, yeah. So, like,
wow.
If the average person, and of course the dollar was a whole lot stronger back then, so making $10,000 a year was like making $50,000 a year now. So if you made $10,000 a year back then, by today's standards, I mean, if the average worker made $40,000 a year, the CEO would make $150,000 a year. But now average worker makes $25,000 a year, and the CEO makes millions.
Yeah, it's usually hundreds before you count, like, all of their stock options and shit like that.
Exactly.
But these narratives are false. There are many nations blessed with abundant natural resources that are poor, and they are poor overwhelmingly because of corrupt governments and policies that destroy incentives to produce. Look at Venezuela.
So yeah, they're poor overwhelmingly because of corrupt governments. That's true. And policies that destroy incentives to produce. Like, they're alluding to social programs, but really it's not the policies that destroy the incentive to produce there. It's the de facto policies. It's the fact that you have to bribe people and that you have to go through these, like, roundabout ways and know how to work the system that makes it so hard to have a business or do anything.
Yeah. Well, and that very reason, I mean, even in the U.S., like, that's the reason that a lot of jobs are getting shipped overseas.
Yeah.
Or down to Mexico, I mean, it's a fucking shame, like, what happened to Detroit.
Yeah.
That used to be, I mean, now it's like a shithole. It's like one of the worst, most dangerous, like, Detroit and Chicago are like did you like how I said Chicago with a little bit of a Chicago accent?
Yeah.
Anyway, they're like they're shitholes.
And
but,
the town of East St. Louis is like 90% black now because in the 50s all the jobs moved out, and they couldn't they couldn't get jobs then because it was before the Civil Rights Act. Detroit
is now 85% black, and it's just like poor. It's just really, really poor. And of course, we're not insinuating that just because a city is predominantly African American that it's a negative thing, but it's just.
But the reason that they're predominantly African American, though, is because a lot of the jobs shipped out before the Civil Rights Act was enforced, and the EEOC was actually out there enforcing it, and so they got stuck with no money to pass on to their kids, and no jobs to benefit from the thriving economy. They had no economy, and they were already poor. So generations later, of course, they're going to be even poorer and struggling to survive.
Exactly. And so, the whole thing with Trump, I mean, that was on paper, like what he's saying, we're going to bring jobs back to America. That was great. I mean, I was like, wow, okay, this is maybe the one decent thing. Yeah. But he had no real plan.
Well, his position on the trade policies was the best. But who knows if he's going to follow through or not, because Republicans love that shit. NAFTA and the other one that was coming up, those...
Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Yeah, there you go. The TPP.
TPP? Yeah.
Venezuela, which has vast oil and mineral reserves, but has shortages of every basic necessity. Why? Because of socialist policies. Because of those same deceiving politicians.
Like, she's just asserting that it's due to socialist policies. She's not providing, like, any reason why. She's just saying, like, these people are corrupt, they have socialist policies, therefore the socialism and the and the corruptness go hand in hand, and one causes the other. But she hasn't even demonstrated a correlation.
Exactly. Yeah, it's jumping to some just broad conclusions.
Yeah, I feel like we're repeating ourselves with the the problems with what she's doing. She's just doing the same thing over and over.
Promise to
There goes
fight for the
free
people
stuff again.
and give you free stuff.
Yeah, right for
And
the
you're
people.
going to fall for these lies again in your adopted country? Do you think by electing
Just because like
what?
just because they're lies under a corrupt government, like doesn't mean that they're always going to be lies and not ever come through with them. You know, look at Western Europe, Northern Europe.
Exactly.
They actually implemented
Canada.
it in in Canada. They implemented it, and it was just fine because they had the right processes and the right ways of going about it.
And the majority of the people are forward-thinking people
Yeah.
in those countries, unlike here where it's just greed that runs everything. And that's the problem, is that there's think about it, there's the majority of people are not wealthy in America. The majority of people are middle class or low class, or not low class, but poor class. And but it seems like the American mentality is that everyone is a millionaire lying in wait.
Right.
That's why people buy lotto tickets.
Yep.
And that's why people vote in the interest. They're like, well, we got to protect the businesses. Dude, you're not a business owner. Like, you want to think like you're a millionaire, but this is going to benefit you.
Yeah.
Raising the minimum wage is going to benefit you.
The thing is if everyone actually like just kind of thought about themselves and actually like in a realistic terms, then that's where you have like true democracy. The corporations are fighting for themselves, the people fighting for themselves. But in America, you have so many poor people fighting for the fucking corporations.
Exactly, and it's because they've been brainwashed by avenues like Fox News.
Yeah.
That have completely, because that's the one source, according to Trump, that's not fake news.
Yeah.
But,
That and,
Breitbart.
Breitbart.
Yeah, like I said, before, Fox News and all that is the right-wing propaganda is basically rich people convincing middle-class people to blame poor people.
Yep.
will fight for the people, fight for social justice, and raise taxes?
It wasn't Trump that kind of quoted Bain when he was like, take it from the corrupt politicians and give it back to you, the people.
I don't remember.
In his inauguration speech, I saw a bunch of videos. People were comparing it to like a speech Bane gave in Batman. And it was like almost ripped off.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me. Dude, that guy is so Hollywood.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It is crazy.
Yeah.
Just the fact that guy tweets about 1,000 times a day.
Yeah, I know.
70-year-old man who can't get off Twitter.
On the 1% who are exploiting the wealth of the 99% that you will get ahead? In other words, will you support the same policies and vote for the same types of politicians here who made such a mess back home? The United States became wealthy because its government stayed out of the way of its citizens.
That statement that she made is semi-true.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking about. It's like, there's so much wrong with it, but it's like hard to unpack because it's kind of...
It is hard to unpack. First of all, I'll give the statement a little bit of credit because the reason that a lot of companies have been successful and, so many metropolitan areas were built up so largely is because people did come here
bigly
with the attitude of, that they can succeed here. The mass immigration, by the way, I have a degree in history, the mass immigration of Europeans around the turn of the century really built up like New York City, for example. And then a lot, even in that time, a lot of Asians were settling on the West Coast. And a lot of them came here and started their own businesses. And a lot of that was because the government wasn't, the countries that they came from, especially like Eastern Europe and everything was state-owned. And so partially that statement is partially true because the government didn't own everything.
So I guess the statement in and of itself is true, but the point, I guess it's trying to make the point that that's the way that it still should continue to be, is like the government stays out of the way of corporations.
Yeah,
lets
and
corporations do whatever they want. But that's not even...
You can't take it to one extreme or the other. You can't take it to where everything's state-owned, and you can't take it to the point that they're just Okay, prime example of the government not intervening in a corporation and it butt-fucking the people is health insurance companies.
Yeah.
Pharmaceutical companies. And that's why healthcare is so expensive, people.
And it's not
insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies.
That would be the government stepping in for the citizens.
Exactly.
And so if you stay out of the way of the citizens and you let corporations... See, that's the problem. That's the problem with Republican politics or ideology or conservative politics, is it's the citizens and the government, but they always leave out the corporations, like, and how much of a role they play and how their goals and what incentivizes them is different from the everyday person, from the citizens.
Yeah.
There's three separate groups: the citizens, the government, and corporations, that all have sort of their own interests in mind. And so now we have a government that has corporate interests in mind, and a decent amount of population that also has corporate interests in mind, so they continue to vote that government in.
Yeah,
because of
easily manipulated people. Yeah, easily manipulated people.
Yep.
And it's scary, and it seems like as time goes on, the less educated people are, and not only the less educated people are, but the less ability people have to reason.
And to think critically, and to
Exactly.
question why things are, and not just accept answers that fit your preconceived notions, and also just make sense, like, just without any extra thought. You know what I mean? Everything has nuance.
Because even the people that are kind of pushed back against the system are still being brainwashed. A lot of them are still, they're not thinking for themselves. They're listening to Alex Jones.
Yeah.
You know, and so like even the people who are, the quote unquote rebels against the system are still being spoon fed what to believe.
Yeah, because they don't think for themselves. They look to, everyone wants, not everyone, but a lot of people want an authority to look to.
Exactly.
But it's like, I don't consider anybody an authority completely on any topic.
No, not at all.
The more power you give to the government, the less power you have to control your own life. Prosperity and opportunity diminish as government grows. So why did you, like so many of my fellow Guatemalans, come to the U.S.? Because your society was broken. You chose to make a new life in the United States. You could have gone to another Latin American country with a similar culture and the same language as your home country, but you didn't, because the United States is different. Please, help keep it that way. I'm Gloria Alvarez, author of The Populist Deception for Prager University.
Well, no, I mean, they chose the United States over most of the developed world because it's pretty much the only developed country, and it's closer than Canada. Like, the rest you gotta cross fucking oceans to get to.
Exactly, and it's not cheap to travel, and most of the people that are from Latin American countries that are immigrating because they're poor and they don't have a whole lot of money to travel. I mean, even a plane ticket, I know, from Dallas to London, for example, is like $1,200.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a whole lot easier to, the United States is closer to these Latin American countries than anywhere else. But I found that video to be a little bit of a propaganda, not a little bit, but, of course they used a heavily accented Latin American woman to
Right, yeah, I know. They always have their token piece for their propaganda.
Exactly.
So, but the biggest problem with this video is constantly conflating why developing nations are developing and saying that it's because of socialism, even though if you look at places that were developed before strong social programs were put in place, they didn't fall apart. Like why is it only the countries that are falling apart are the ones that were already fucking fucked up before?
Well, that's just it. I mean, for instance, the United States went through our industrial revolution in the 1870s and 1880s and 1890s, but mainly like 1880s. But the first country to really industrialize was England, and they industrialized, I believe it was in the 1840s, and that was way before any socialist, you know, legislation was put into place, and their economy certainly did not crumble. I mean, we surpassed them as a world power after World War II, but I mean, they're still probably number two.
Yeah.
We can see Russia from our backyard. They also make a lot of pornos with me.